Hello and happy Friday to all of you, and welcome to today's video. My name is Tamara and I'm a psychologist from South Africa. So this video is a follow-up to Monday's video on guilt and a sense of indebtedness within guilt as a construct, and it looked at quite a bit of that indebted feeling of when you struggle with a lot of guilt and you feel that you owe people a lot just to maintain the relationship, fix the relationship, keep peace, or help people get out of circumstances. So in that video, we discussed and analyzing if you don't work through that sense of indebtedness, you run the risk of being attracted to and bringing in to your energy people that have the opposite, which is a sense of entitlement. So where we're going to start with the psychology of entitlement is we're going to revisit the concept of having an internal versus an external locus of control. Now, when we have an internal locus of control, we utilize our internal resources, our internal sense of resiliency. So when we traverse through life and we go through hardship and difficulties, if you can learn from the situation and get back up and move forward, you develop what we call as a concept of resiliency, and sometimes even further called post-traumatic growth, which is where you learn from the circumstance and you actually get better. So that is another concept we'll get to at one point. But in essence, it's looking at your own attitude, your own initiative taking in the resources that you have available at present to develop you within your career, in your relationships, or any facet of life. So it's a lot about attitude taking, perspective taking, and initiative. So it's a very active process. It's not a passive process, and it's not reactive. So it's not you being passive and reacting to external circumstances. It's you largely activating all the internal resources that you have at your disposal towards the world. And then here and there, when there are things thrown in your way in the trajectory of life, you will then react, but you'll have more active participation and willingness to do something about this. This is a lot about your own internal talents, skills, and developments that you utilize and grow within your lifespan. And as you build upon that, then you build a life journey for yourself that largely your entitlement comes from within. So you earn it. You earn the career, you earn your relationships in many ways, because it's a lot about investment and investing a large portion of your time, energy, and mutual reciprocity. So that's so important to understand, is that when you have that internal locus of control, you have to a very large extent a sense of empowerment. You feel largely in many areas of your life a internal sense of power. So it's not to say that life isn't unfair at many times and there isn't a sense of timing that needs to happen, and luck. Luck has to come in many aspects of life. But apart from that, if you have an internal locus of control, you understand that no matter what happens, it's outside of your control, like luck, timing, circumstance, trauma, grief, all of those things. That as you build the capacity to overcome those things in resiliency and fortitude of spirit, that you can move on and move forward. And it's a lot about psychoeducation in utilizing these skills and sometimes asking for help to get to that juncture. And we as psychotherapists try and help navigate people towards that internal locus of control with help, but we don't want them to become dependent forever. Is we want them to utilize the space for psychoeducation, localizing internal locus, and then continue to develop skills if they continue with psychotherapy. Now, as opposed to that, an external locus of control is completely opposite. So it is a passive position. So the person in the passive position reacts to life. So they are choosing to not become an active, willing participant in their life trajectory, and rather are allowing life and the external impingements that come with life to navigate them, to focus that energy onto them. And often there is a psychology of sitting back and complaining about how unfair life can be. So often it's not just a mutual or a reciprocal navigation towards a cyclical depression that could happen. So it could happen, say, one year there's a lot of things that happen, maybe a hijacking, or there's a huge grief period that tumbles the person, that makes them feel really down, which is very normative in the lifespan. But this is a person that in general, in many areas of life and for a long period of time, they have a passive approach. It's not just that life was difficult for a period, is they feel largely out of control of their circumstances and choose to navigate life like that. So when they do that, when they adopt that external locus of control and that passive approach, they feel and they produce that kind of imprint on their environment that the world, their community, their families owe them, because life is so unfair. And it's almost like they act like they were dealt a bad set of cards. The hand they were dealt is not fair. So it comes from a totally opposite approach of being very disempowered. They feel largely victimized by life, and they continue to react to life in that way. The challenge with this is the more that you perpetuate and feed that cycle, the more the disempowerment grows. And as we were speaking about in the video with disempowerment in terms of being very indebted to people, they will find and try and pull out energy from others that are quite indebted to the world. They feel quite guilty and they have to do quite a bit for these relationships. And they will mobilize that kind of empathy from others, especially people that really have a lot of empathy for other people and their struggles. It's so difficult to walk past someone when they are in struggle, when they are in a lot of pain, and you just want to help them. The problem is if you do this perpetually in your relationships, and especially with people that have this external locus of control, you are actually not helping them. You're not helping them access those internal resources that we are all born with and develop over time. Is you just feeding a disempowered, enabling cycle. So how do we shift this dynamic, especially if you know that you tend to feel really compassionate, or you're stuck in a relationship where someone is quite victimized and disempowered and they don't utilize or strengthen their talents or internal resources and things like that as you should with an internal locus of control. How do you deal with that? Is the kindest, most compassionate thing that you can do for people like this is to reflect back to them that you feel as though when you speak to them, they act as if life is quite unfair to them and that they're largely reacting to it, and that largely life is outside of their control, is that things happen to them externally. And you can reflect to them that all of us are born with and develop our internal sources of control, mechanisms, coping, resiliency, and strength that we develop over time. And that they need to look at that, at building that, because that the shortest term solution for you to help them is to solve the problem, but it's a short-term solution for a long-term problem. So if you intervene and you solve the problem then, there and then, so say if someone needs to borrow money, or they need help with an abusive relationship or something like that, and they continue to go back to the abusive relationship, is you are enabling a cycle where the problem is sorted for a moment, but then they continue to hurt themselves and disempower themselves. And if you are feeling very indebted to them, you are brought in, you are locked into that cycle with them. And like in the previous video, you can't set yourself free, you can't move out, you move out of that whole internal dynamic. Why is it important to make them aware? Is if you help them, make them aware, then you can say you have a choice. It is now your choice to do something about this. And you can do it with empathy, because many, many times people are suffering very, very deeply, and they need the help. They need this therapy or the coaching or the counseling, but they can only be helped if they are willing to be helped. As in, a therapeutic relationship is largely bi-directional and reciprocal. The client needs to take an active participant role in their own healing and help. But of course, we have to empathize. It's just that we don't want to move from empathy to enabling. There's a very, very big difference. With empathy, we feel for other people's pain. But when we are enabling, we participating in their continued pain and disempowerment. We don't want to do that. So in essence, they may at times, very disempowered people and people that feel very victimized by life, they may feel at first that you're being quite mean or harsh to them because you're not helping them in the here and now of whatever the problem is that they're bringing to you now, because they want to be on some level enabled to not take an active role in their own lives for many reasons. There are many, many, many reasons as to why that occurs. They could come from very troubling backgrounds. They could come from a lot of trauma, and they probably don't believe that they can do it because they've had in many areas of their lives people that have cleaned things up for them, because as I said, they will try and bring in people that will empower that disempowered narrative within them. So what you want to actually do is help them. And a way to be kind is to be honest and to say to them that I want to help you, but I feel that what you're asking me for is not going to help you. So what if we can try and look at ways in which that you can help yourself? E.g., if someone is in debt to something, a big debt repayment, and they're asking you to loan them money, instead of you immediately paying off if you do have the funds to help them, instead of you doing that, what about if you give them a book to read about financial literacy or financial knowledge or empowerment and things like that to get them out of it? Can you imagine what this person will be like at the end of it when they climb out of the hole by themselves with you next to them, not you pulling them out of the hole? That's the most important thing. Remember that all of us as human beings are going through difficulties in our lives at different points in our lives and at different severities. Everybody has got that. And so yes, pain and suffering is relative to the circumstance and situation, but we don't want to pity people. We don't want to send the message that we believe that they cannot do it. They can do it, but it is up to that willingness, the active participation role in helping themselves in their own lives. Please remember that, especially guys, those of you that struggle with this guilt narrative and you're trying to heal this, where you feel so indebted to people, when you encounter folks like this, it's going to be highly triggering for you. It's going to reawaken that part of you where you think, oh, I'm being so selfish or cruel or unkind to help people like this, or not help people like this, I should say, as you're going to walk away. You're not walking away, you are helping them, but with a different approach. It's a longer term, deeper approach. I hope this is helpful, and I welcome any questions or comments below.